Okay, so let's see if this works. This is the first time I've used the Canvas recording. So we'll do about a 30-minute lecture here and then see if I can upload that for you guys. All right, so Biology 140, Human Anatomy. All right, so anatomy is the art of separating the parts of an organism in order to ascertain their position, relations, and structures. Cutting something up to see what's inside. Don't confuse it with physiology. We'll get to that. So, different types of anatomy. You got microscopic anatomy and gross anatomy. Microscopic is small, obviously. And we divide that into two categories here in this class. So cytology, which is the study of the internal structure of cells, and histology, which is the study of tissues or groups of cells. So think muscle. You got skeletal muscle versus cardiac muscle versus smooth muscle. So the study of those different types, that's histology. And we'll talk more about this later. So gross anatomy, that's the big stuff. So the stuff you can see on the surface, that's the surface anatomy. Whereas regional anatomy, think of a foot, like a podiatrist, their region is the foot. And so basically they have to know all of the nerves and the blood vessels and the muscles and the bones in that region. Systemic anatomy, that's studying one of the 11 organ systems. Some books divide your organ systems into 12, but here we lump lymphatic and immune together. So an example would be like the digestive system or the respiratory system or, urinary system. Okay. So gross anatomy, we talked about just a minute ago. So the surface anatomy, that's what you can see at the surface of the body, everyday life. Like the hollow in your arm where you draw blood from, that's part of your surface anatomy. Yeah, it would be the antecubital fossa. Regional anatomy, we talked about. It's where you know all the structures in a specific region of the body, foot, hand, whatever. Systemic anatomy, the body's divided into the 11 organ systems. So this is why you got to be careful here. This slide, we're not trying to learn everything on this slide. We'll learn most of it later, but all this slide is trying to show you is the gross anatomy of the eye. We're not trying to learn cornea, lens, ciliary body, retina. We're not learning that. Optic nerve, not yet. That's on a whole nother test. This is just showing you the gross anatomy of the eye. That's the whole point of this slide. Where the point of this slide is showing you histology of the retina. So the retina is neural tissue. Remember, study of tissues. And so now you could delve a little deeper into this and look at some of these cells, and then you're talking cytology. So like here's a cone and there's a rod. Don't stress on it, but cones are for seeing color and rods are for black and white. So if you're studying all the structures of this cone, then you're talking cytology. So a little bit of difference between cytology versus histology. Sounds like a good quiz question, doesn't it? Physiology is a branch of biology that deals with the functions and activities of life or of living matter, and of the physical and chemical phenomena involved. So it's basically how does something work? How does a cell work? How does an organ work or an organ system? What's its function? Structure follows function is just kind of a little rule. Structure follows function. The anatomy, which would be the shape, the position, the structure of something, has evolved generally to fulfill its function, hopefully. And the function would be physiology. So, as an example, say the bones. The anatomy of the ribs protects the organs in the chest cavity. The strong bone protects the soft tissue, so it's helping helping that system do its function. Um, So the branching of blood vessels, they branch, they branch, smaller, smaller, smaller vessels, and that helps deliver the blood to almost all of the cells in the body. So the uh, the structure of the cardiovascular system is helping it perform its function. That's all this is trying to say. This is kind of continuing on with that theme. So here's a nephron. These are in the kidneys, right? Got a lot of different nephrons in a kidney. And a nephron, it's going to help. It's going to, concentrate urine and get rid of waste. We don't need to know any of that right now. We just need to know that this structure, see this loop called the loop of Henle, looping way down into the deep part of the kidney, is helping it perform its function. Because there are different osmolarities, or what I think of as salt concentrations, and that uh, the shape of this loop and the depth of this loop help it perform its function. So see right here, here's the outer part of the kidney, and then look how this loop is looping deep down into this, what they call the medulla, or the middle part of the kidney. And there are different osmolarities, or what I think of as salt concentrations in this medulla. And so that helps, water or different ions, go one way or the other. And so basically this shape and its position and its structure help it perform its function. That's all it's trying to say. What is this slide trying to tell you? Basically, it's showing you a sagittal cut. So here's a sagittal, mid-sagittal cut right here. And we can see a few different things in here. And you go, oh, there's the bladder. There's the urethra going through the penis. So let's concentrate on the urethra. You would say, oh, that's part of the urinary system. And you would be right. But it's also, once you get past this juncture here, it's also part of the reproductive system because it's a passageway for sperm that are produced here in this testicle. And so it's the urethra from here down is a shared passageway for either urine and sperm or sperm. So technically it's in both systems. So sometimes the structure can be in two different organ systems. That's the point of this slide. The point of this slide is just showing you that you got different levels of organization. The smallest things in this case would be the chemicals. They make up cells. The cells make up tissues. The tissues can make up organs. The organs can make up organ systems, and then everything together makes up the organism. So think about it. Say you got an organ like the stomach. Here's a stomach. So it can have different tissues in it. You have four major tissue types. Epithelial tissue is one. Muscle tissue is another. Neural tissue, and then a catch-all category would be connective tissue. Does the stomach have all four of those main tissue types? Yeah. It's got muscle kind of towards the outside. It's got epithelium deep on the inside. It's got nerves go to it. And then there's connective tissue in here. So an organ can be made of two or more tissues, right? Now, how could I ask this on a test? Maybe I do a multiple choice and I swap a couple of these things around. What if I put tissue here and cellular here? And, basically I had, four of those, and I said, pick out the correct order. Just make sure you pick out the one that goes smallest to largest, you know. It's about the only way I can ask a question on that. And this is just elucidating it a little more. Chemicals, or elements and molecules, that's the smallest little constituents, and they can get together and make up cells, which are subunits of an organism. The tissues are collections of similar types of cells. Organs can be a collection of tissues. Organ systems are many organs working together. Think of your respiratory system. Well, you have a trachea, you have bronchi, you have lungs, so all of those structures, or technically you could call them organs, are working together to carry out, a bodily function, which would be respiration. Um, Organism, that's the entire, animal, us in this case. Not going to ask you anything. I'm not going to put pie charts on the test, but it's just kind of good to know. This is our constituents, basically 67% water. We've got about 20% protein, 10% lipids or fats and carbohydrates. It's basically what makes us up. And then here are some trace elements that are inside of us too. And look how tiny iodine, 0.000003% of the body. Not much, but very, very important, trace element, because the thyroid, the thyroid hormones, they have iodine hooked to them. So you got to have that for, proper metabolism. Iron, think about the iron in your blood, and carrying oxygen. Magnesium is involved in a lot of different enzymatic reactions, very important, So even though these things are not that big, or, is of a percentage of your total body, they can be very, very important. Don't stress on this. It's just a universal cell. They're showing you there's no cell with cilia on one side, microvilli on the other side. But if I have this laminate, I can point at these and go, what are those? Cilia. What's the function? They move things along. They can move. They move, think of in your trachea. The cilia can sweep out dust and pollen out, where you can either spit it out or swallow it, from, once it sweeps it up. Then there's your microvilli. They don't generally move. They're basically for absorption. So think about, where would you need a lot of absorption? Well, what about the small intestines? Good place to find microvilli. Yeah. There's some other things we'll talk about when we get to another lecture, but just know the basics, like what they are if I point at them, and then maybe a one-sentence definition. Like if I point at you, go mitochondria. Powerhouse of the cell, makes ATP. Same thing here, and this, you should remember this from your Bio 130, so I'm not going to go through it all, but just make sure you know lysosome, Golgi, rough and smooth ER, endoplasmic reticulum, the nucleus or the genetic material stored. Don't forget the plasma membrane, right? Semi-permeable, right? Very important. This is just showing you some microscopic anatomy of smooth muscle. Look how different this smooth muscle looks from this smooth muscle. Why does it look so different? Well, this is cut long ways down the length of a cell. These cells are coming at you. So, these cells are kind of spindle shaped, kind of like a big spindle. And so that's why you see so many nuclei here. And you don't, you'll have lots of areas with no nuclei here. You just missed it because these are long cells. And say they're coming at you, and some of them got cut across, but you just did not happen to cut through the nucleus. Basically, this is just trying to show you that smooth muscle or different tissues can look different depending on how they're cut. Why is it called smooth? You don't see any little stripes in here, do you? You have thousands and thousands of little stripes in skeletal muscle and cardiac muscle, and those stripes are called striations. That's just the way the contractile proteins are arranged in the muscle. But they're not, contractile proteins are arranged differently in smooth, so they don't really show up like that. Hence the name smooth muscle, because it looks smooth under a microscope. This is just showing you some tonsils. We don't we don't need to know the separate ones, so you don't need to know pharyngeal, palatine, lingual. If I pointed and I just went A, what are those structures? Just go tonsils, and you'll get credit. Now, on another test, I may ask you to identify them, right? This one is a single, mass. You got two of these, and you have two of these. Don't worry about that. Another test. If I point at this, don't just go eye. I'm probably asking you region, so you would go oculus or ocular region, nasus or nasal region, oris or oral region. And we'll have all those on another slide. There's plenty of regions that you'll need to be able to identify. If I throw something like this on there, I'm just trying to give some points away. This is basically from your 130. I can go name 2, 3, 4 different properties that are shared by all living organisms. And you remember this, like responsiveness, growth. I don't even know if I'd put differentiation if you're talking about a single cell organism. So basically, these properties are shared by the smallest to the largest. So everything from an amoeba to a blue whale or a redwood tree. Um, Reproduction, movement, metabolism and excretion, homeostasis. Um, so, um, just could be an essay question. Don't overthink it. Just give me general. Don't get real specific. Go. Everything has a heart. Everything does not have a heart, right? An amoeba doesn't have a heart, so that's not one of the vital properties of all living organisms. So stick general like we did here. Okay. The body has 11 organ systems. Each organ system has a number of organs within the system. Each organ has a specific function or functions, and the organs work together to give the organ system its function. So here's the organ systems, or some of them. Integumentary, think skin, hair, and nails. Protection from the environment, helps the control the body temperature. There's energy storage because there's fat, underneath the skin, remember. Skeletal, so think bones. Support, protection of soft tissues. There's mineral storage, and don't forget your blood cell formation happens in certain areas, like in the red bone marrow in certain bones. Muscle, or the muscular system, it's for locomotion. It's also to help support, your posture. Heat production, you get cold, you can shiver, right? So let's look at these. There's the integumentary system, and here's a cut of skin. And there's all kind of structures that we'll learn later, like hair follicle, sebaceous gland, sweat gland, erector pili. That's some smooth muscle, by the way, that can make your hair stand up. It's just showing you some bones. Nervous system helps direct immediate responses to stimuli by coordinating the actions of other organs using chemical messengers known as what? And you would go neurotransmitters. Endocrine system uses chemical messengers known as hormones. So hormones are long-term changes. They happen over hours or days or weeks or months. Neurotransmitters generally does it quickly. Just seconds, right, or fractions of a second usually, and then they're broken down quickly. The neurotransmitters generally are. Cardiovascular system that helps transport cells and dissolve materials, including nutrients, waste, and gases. That's all, your blood carries that stuff. We'll go over some of the pieces and parts, like just know you got the pump and the pipe. So basically the heart, the arteries and veins, which we're not making you differentiate here. Just make sure, not counting the ones on the vessels on the heart itself, but the ones away from it. So arteries carry blood away from the heart as a general rule, and veins carry blood to the heart. Okay. That's about as complicated as we're going to get, right? We're not going to worry about which ones are oxygenated and deoxygenated because it gets a little complicated in places. Here's some endocrine stuff, hormones. Don't worry about pituitary gland. Don't worry about pineal, not on this test. I know it's in your little lab book, but we'll do that on test 4. Thyroid, fair game. Even the little parathyroids behind and to the side of the thyroid, that one's flipped around. They make a hormone too. So those are fair game, thyroid and parathyroid. So they're right in here. Here's a pancreas. You go, oh wait, I thought that made digestive enzymes. It does. But it also makes insulin for lowering blood sugar and glucagon for raising blood sugar. And so it's an endocrine gland also. So it's a double duty, right? Here's adrenal glands, right? They got both of these on this one picture here. They got ovaries and they got testes, and those are in the endocrine system because hormones, right? But they're also in the reproductive system, so double duty again. Okay. Lymphatic system, defense against infection and disease. The respiratory system is deliver air to where gas exchange can occur between the air and the circulating blood. And then the digestive system is for processing of food and absorption of organic nutrients, minerals, vitamins, and water. So let's look at these real quick. So probably got, about right. So tonsils. Don't forget thymus. Don't say thyroid. That's a totally different gland. So the thymus is in the lymphatic system. But does it make a hormone? Yes. Don't worry about it. But technically, this is double duty. I mainly put it in the lymphatic system, but it does make a hormone. So it also goes in the endocrine system. Just don't confuse it with the thyroid, which would be up here. Totally different, right? Here's a spleen over here on the left side, right? Kind of like a gigantic lymph node fed by blood. Here's some lymph nodes, these little dots, and lymphatic vessels are in green. So that could be fair game, point name. Lungs, bronchi, right and left primary bronchi. Bronchus is singular, bronchi is plural. And then there's a trachea. So these are three of the main parts of the respiratory system. There's more, but we're not getting into all that right now. This is overview, remember? So I point at that, you go right lung. Point at that, you go left lung. Trachea, right primary bronchus, left primary bronchus. Then digestive, don't overthink it, just go with the big stuff. We'll go esophagus. Oh, salivary glands, don't forget those. Stomach, small intestine, large intestine. Don't forget liver, pancreas, and gallbladder. Technically, that's all part of your digestive. Just the big parts. You don't need to know the subdivisions of the small intestines or large intestines or any of that. We'll get to that on another test. Urinary system, that helps eliminate. So make sure you just know a one-sentence blurb for each system in case I do a matching or a little fill in the blank. Give me a little short description of what it does. Urinary system, elimination of excess water, salts, and waste products. Don't forget, it can also help control pH, the acid-base balance of the body fluids. It can have something to do with that also. Reproductive system, production of sex cells and hormones. We talked about that. So just know the four big parts on urinary: kidney, ureter, bladder, urethra. You can't see here. Don't confuse ureter. I'm saying it wrong, so you'll spell it right. Ureter. It's actually pronounced ureter. The ureter connects the bladder to the kidney. See, here's the bladder down here. There's kidney up here. So from the kidney to the bladder, that urine flows there. And so that's in the ureter. And then from the bladder out would be the urethra. So don't miss the big parts, right? Anatomical terminology. The standardized anatomical language used to describe the body. So first you got to put yourself in the anatomical position. And so this guy would be standing in the anatomical position. Let's see if I can get this a little smaller for you. You see the whole picture. Okay. Always go from this position when you're talking directions. So let's talk about directions. So you're at the belly button going out that way. That would be lateral. So you're going towards the midline. That direction would be medial. If you're on the torso going up, that would be superior. See, if you're on this torso going down, That would be inferior. Now, you can't use those terms, superior and inferior, on a limb. You got to use proximal and distal, because what if she raised her hand above her head, right? Then the fingertips would now be superior, technically, right? So this is, you use distal. So if you're going towards the fingertips, you're going distally. If you're going towards the shoulder, basically here, you would be going proximally. Okay, so that's towards the point. That's towards the torso. So going towards the toes, you'd be going distal. Going towards the thigh and up, you'd be going proximal. Anterior, posterior. So to the front is anterior, to the back is posterior. Be careful with these words, dorsal and ventral. On the torso, you're fine saying dorsal and ventral. Ventral is the same as anterior in this case. Dorsal is the same as posterior in this case. Now, don't forget, evolutionarily, our legs are twisted around under us compared to a lizard, right? So on a lizard, their thighs are pointing up towards the sun, right? So technically that's dorsal, but on us, they're twisted around under us. So all of this on the front, that's dorsal. Tops of the feet, dorsal. All of this on the back, ventral. Okay, so be careful. Some med schools are trying to call everything on the front ventral and everything on the back dorsal. That's not technically true, and I don't know if that's going to stick, but a few schools are trying to go with that. But really, this part on the front right here and on the tops of the feet, that's really dorsal. And this behind the knee and back here and the bottoms of the feet, that's ventral. Okay, so let's go back to these. We'll go over this next lecture, but see, like we talked about some of these, like oris, right? Oris for the mouth. That's the Latin in bold, but generally you hear it used in a sentence like oral, like pertaining to the oral cavity, right? Nasus, you generally don't use it like that. You say, oh, a nasal swab or whatever. So generally in the not bold is the way you use it in a sentence. So you can give me either one. I don't care. It's just kind of a grammar thing in Latin, right? Like, yes, this is the abdomen, but you go, oh, the abdominal muscles. That's generally the way you use it in a sentence. So you can give me either way if I point at it. So if I point, here's a weird one. If I point at the front of the shin here and you go crus, that's fine. Or if you go crural region, which is hard to say, that's fine too. All right, did that. And then here are planes, and then we'll shut it off after this. So mid-sagittal divides the body into a right half and a left half. Now, if you went a little bit, say an inch over to the side right here in the same direction, then that would be a parasagittal plane. It's still sagittal, it's just to the side. You can have lots and lots and lots of parasagittal planes, but you can only have one mid-sagittal plane. If you divide the body into a front half and a back half, that would be a frontal plane. So if you divide it across horizontally, then that would be transverse. Yeah, you can have different transverse planes and frontal planes, but if you said horizontal plane, I would give it to you. Okay, now at an angle like this, any angle, it could be an angle like that or like that, you would call it oblique. Don't forget that word, it's very important. It's oblique. And I don't know why they don't use that in your 9th edition on this page, because it's a very important word. Okay, so it's right at 30 minutes. So we're going to shut this off and see if it recorded. Okay.